Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands. Searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting. Bow hunters, what is up? Welcome back to another episode. It's been a hot minute. I have been pretty full on. And you know what? To be honest, it's actually just not worked out with a lot of the guests that I've been talking to recently with trying to line up times. There's people who work away on shifts. There's people who are just not available when I'm available and vice versa. So it does make it quite tough in that regard. So with that being said, I do have a little recap for you. It was done on the drive home. It was very fresh, very raw. For anyone who watched any of my footage on Instagram, I might even go back and make it as a highlights, because the whole time I tried to keep it pretty raw and keep you guys in the loop the whole time as to what was going on with the raw. Raw. Yes, anyway. So, guys, welcome back to Becoming a Bowhunter. It has been a hot minute, like I said. I've been working hard with the Bowhunters on the Bowhunters Challenge, and they've been doing an awesome job. We're just about through, actually. We're just about through the first 12-week cycle, which means in the coming weeks, probably in about a month's time, I'm going to launch a second phase of the Bowhunters Challenge. So if you are interested in improving your fitness, improving your health, your nutrition, if you're interested in becoming a better bow hunter, if you were let down because of your fitness over this rut, if you were chafing like a mother F and you were not doing so well during the rut and you were let down because of your fitness, then this is a really good program for that. It's really literally designed for bulletproofing your shoulders, making sure you can draw back your bow at any time, making sure you guys can get up and down the mountains smoothly and safely, and making sure that you're fit and healthy for longevity of life so you can get around to bow hunt for years on end, but also be around for your family when you're older as well. I definitely wasn't let down by my fitness at all. This rut or this raw, not at all. I was happy to keep going. I did keep going as long as I could. It was all about experience for me this year. So I hope you guys enjoy hearing this one. I hope you guys get to hopefully pick up from my mistakes and learn from them and take them into either the rut or the raw if you're still out and about, or use them for next time when you are out and about. Apart from that, I had a heap of fun. Like, I don't want this to come across. I think it would definitely hurt not getting a deer down. I think I went in probably a little bit cocky, and so I think you kind of hear that in the conversation anyway. I think I even talk about that. But yeah, I think I definitely had a blast. It's so much fun, and I said to my wife the other day, why did I not just draw back? And you'll hear all about that. And she said. And then I said something along the lines of, like, I just hate not getting a job done. And it was very funny because I talk about it all the time, not having that instant gratification like we do all the time from our phone and whatever else. And that's what bow hunting is so good for. So, yes. Welcome back. I'll let you guys listen. Hope you're having fun. If you guys are interested in doing the Bowhunters Challenge for the next time around, you can hit me up on Instagram. It's at becomingabowhunter.podcast. I'm thinking about turning down the sales page for a few days, weeks, because you actually can't sign up right now. But I will have that ready to roll in a few weeks' time. Again, we are giving away a bow. We're giving away a Hoyt Ventum 33. This is the bow that Chad Mendez is using. It's the bow that Cam Haynes is using. Like, it is the new top-of-the-line Hoyt. It is freaking ridiculous how good this bow is, and it is going to be hunt-ready. So for you guys to go in the chance to win that, all you need to do is sign up for the Bowhunters Challenge. So like I said, send me a message. I'll give you all the details for it, including when we're going to start again. And other than that, I hope you guys got some deer down this week, in this run. I hope you guys had an awesome experience. I hope you got out there. I hope you got to hear the roaring, hear the croaking. And just what that does for your insides is incredible. Hope you guys are doing well, and we'll talk soon. Alrighty, you pack of scallywags, listen on in. I'm going to tell you about my 2021 Roar rut experience. It was, I'm just driving back from it now, so hence why the audio is not as good as it usually is. But hopefully you guys can deal with it and stick through with it. There's a lot to happen, that's for sure. So, where to start? Day one. I got in here on Wednesday afternoon. And I got told by my auntie and uncle, or my auntie, that there had been some roaring reds on the back of the hill that's literally just over the house. So I took a venture up there for the afternoon. The winds all weekend were just a bit horrible, unfortunately. I went on round and got to the other side and started walking on down. It's funny, it was being what I thought was so quiet and just moseying along, and at one point I looked to my left and there's just this mob of cows just looking at me like, oh, maybe I'm not being as quiet as I thought. They were on a part of the hill that I couldn't see, so it's kind of like they uncovered and saw me. But as I was walking along, also funny, a few times I heard like a few little things that started to sound like a roar, and I was like, oh, like you just want everything to be a roar in that moment when you're coming out for your first little hunt of the season, and it would end up just being like a bee or something like that, like a buzzing bee. It's like brrr, and that was the sound that sounded like the start of the roar of a red or whatever. But anyway, I got around the side, started walking up this hill, and then behind me started hearing some roars, some proper roars. So I went down, and they were actually on the neighbour's block, up in a valley that kind of overlooked my creek. So what I was doing was trying to call them in, and so I had a hind call going, and damn, I got a sexy hind voice, that's for sure, because I got a lot of deer walking into me, and he was talking to me non-stop. He just kept coming closer and closer, and he'd fight me. Didn't want to come in, obviously, but kept the conversation going. And then it was like there was another stag or something up above him that then had a crack at him. I'm not really sure what happened, but at first I wasn't sure if maybe it was some other hinds going on, but I think it was actually just another red roaring at him as well. If you know the difference, or if you've heard them roar and you've heard them bark or honk, there was at one point where the honking started, and that's when I thought there was hinds maybe getting involved and saying, that bitch ain't real, don't go down there. I'm not really sure what was happening there, but yeah, so pretty much the honking happened, the roaring happened, and then they kind of shut off a little bit after that. They went quiet. And I never got him to come on. The winds actually changed, that's what happened. So I never got him to come on in, but that was an exciting day one or first hunt. So the next morning, rather than going back over that side because they were over on the neighbours' blocks anyway, I wanted to go out and check out where the reds usually are hanging out in this block and where I've found them the most. So I took a trek over there and walked up, and probably within literally 5 minutes, 10 minutes of being there, I saw a deer walking up the hill. I could just see its bum. It was walking up the hill in front of me, so I just kind of moseyed up behind it, just waiting to see what it would do. And within that time that we're moseying up the hill, and it went over the hill, I kind of was moseying up the hill, there was a red started roaring in the valley kind of just over this ridge and below us. So I made my way over and was quietly walking down. That deer had just disappeared. I don't know where it got to. So I just started making my way down towards where this red was, underneath him, and he was sounding almighty and glorious. I hadn't seen him yet, but I knew he was up on the ridge, so I'd come down to the bottom of the valley, had to get back up the ridge to go find him. So I kind of backtracked a little bit and went around, and as I was walking through, I found a deer, and it was not the red that was roaring, but it was a little spiky, little stag. So he would have been a year old, and he was just feeding down there. And so because he was between me and where I needed to be, I wasn't really sure what to do, so I kind of just stood there for a bit, put something behind me, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do some hind calls and see what happens, see how he reacts to it, see if we can get this other big boy to come in closer. And so I did that. I jumped down. Started hind calling, and he actually ran away from me. He ran the opposite direction. I'm like, oh shit, have I stuffed up here? And he went over to where the big stag was. And so what I did was I was just like, oh, well, maybe I might be able to get the big boy in. So I kept hind calling, and probably within 3 or 4 different hind calls, then he just literally ran straight to me, straight to my foot, pretty much. He was 20 metres away when he first got to me, but I didn't draw back as he was running in. At first, I wasn't going to take a shot. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want him. Like, he's obviously just a young stag. And then I was like, you know what? You've been talking about the meat so much to your friends and been promising people meat when I get it again. So I was like, I'm just going to take him. Like, he'll be a good meat animal. So he started to walk behind a tree. And so in that moment, I drew back. And so he was kind of aware that something was going on up the hill. He was looking at me. He was just a bit funky on what it actually was. But yeah, so I drew back and had him set him perfectly. He was now at about probably 30 metres. And so I had my pin on him at 30 and took the shot and boom, smacked him, got him good. So I thought, and he ran off about 80 metres or so, and then I didn't hear him keep running. So there's a fair bit of trees and stuff in the way. So I just kind of sat still for about 5 minutes, taking in the moment, waiting to see if I could hear anything go on, waiting to see what the other stag would do. And pretty much there was not much noise happening at all. I could see my arrow, but I couldn't really see what had been done. And so I went down, and as I was walking down to my arrow, I actually saw the stag that I just hit, the spiky. He was standing there, all well and good, with now a blood patch on his back. So what happened, I think, is I've hit him in no man's land, which is the space pretty much above the lungs, between the lungs and your ribs, essentially. Yeah, so I wasn't too stoked about that. I don't really know the full ins and outs of the anatomy in that space there, but apparently it is quite a common thing to have happen. I had filmed it on my GoPro, and so I went back to watch that footage later, but unfortunately my GoPro was pretty much facing the ground. You can't see anything. You can see the deer run off at the very end, but you don't see him walk in, you don't see the shot. So yeah, I have a fair feeling that he actually ducked the shot. I think that's exactly what did happen. But because he was aware of me being there, I think I'm like, that's the only thing I can really put it down to, and I didn't aim any lower than what I should have. So yes, that was obviously a learning lesson straight up. The first of many. So he kind of just stuck around for a while. Like, I watched him for a good 10 minutes, and he would lift his his front leg, but it was his right side, so the one that was behind him from where he was standing to me. He would lift that every once in a while, but really it looked like it was not bothering him at all. Like, he kind of was just going about his day. He started eating again. It just really gives you an understanding as to how tough these animals are, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. I felt awful. I felt horrible about that. That was super sucking. I guess that is a big pill that we as hunters need to swallow. It is hunting, and unfortunately, like, I thought he was as good as dead. I literally thought I'd done the perfect placement. I thought I'd gone a good double lung shot, but it was just not how it played out. And I actually got footage of the shot, as I said, or not of the shot, but of the shot being taken. I got footage before and after, and I was not sure whether I wanted to put it up, to be honest, because I was like, you know what, this isn't really advocating for the hunting that I would like to promote, in the sense that I don't ever want to go out and injure animals. Like, that's not the plan. The plan is to obviously take the animal and take meat. But after kind of debating with myself for a few days, I was like, you know what, this raw stuff is also what really helps people understanding what does happen if you do take a wrong shot. Having that side of it is also really important. So that's why I did end up posting it up on my Instagram stories, and hence why I'm talking about it now. As much as it really plays on my mind and will keep playing on my mind, I still think it is important to share that stuff, like the wins and the losses. It can't just all be about wins, because otherwise you do kind of just have this fake vision as to what hunting would be like, or what it should be. So yeah, that was quite unfortunate that all kind of played out that way. And yeah, he kept feeding off, and he eventually kind of walked up the hill into my wind, and he was just gone. Like, I was trying to get a little bit closer to him to see if I could get a follow-up shot on him, but all big old potholes. But yeah, while I was doing that, it wasn't meant to be, and eventually he got my wind and he took off. So within a few minutes of that, though, I heard old mate still roaring a bit around the corner, so I took a few steps and sure enough found him. And this guy was the big man of the mountain. It was the big stag that I could hear, and probably the biggest stag that I saw for the weekend. And so I made my way over to where he was, and I saw some movement at one point just off from him. It was just like a little shimmer of something. So I kind of sat there and glassed for quite a while, and eventually a hind popped her head up, and yeah, sure enough, it was just a bit of her back that I kind of saw over the side of the mountain. So I knew this was going to be an interesting little stalk in. So I started to go towards them. I was probably only maybe 80 metres, maybe 60 metres. Like, I wasn't that far from them at all. But there was kind of like a curve in the mountain, as well as like a little dip in the mountain between us. So there was enough kind of dead ground that I could use to get to them, as well as there was a fair few big trees in the way. So I was using them to help me get to them. And so I just realised my car was still in full drive high, and so I just switched it on. But yeah, so I saw these deer, and I started walking towards them. And as I was on my way, there's these birds. These birds were the bane of my existence all weekend. They I don't actually know what they were, but they whistled to each other, boo, boo, boo. And then when they see you, it's like a like it's something similar to that sort of sound. Like they've got this raspy, harsh sound, and that's what they do when they see you. And so there was one of them, and then all of a sudden I had 20 of them on top of this tree over the top of me. And I thought this whole stalk was fucked. I'm like, oh, there it goes. Like those deer are obviously very aware to the sounds of these birds, and they've bailed out. So I kept walking, but it was a bit more ruthless, I guess. And I was like, you know what? There's a fair chance that maybe they've just spooked down this hill a little bit, like they haven't gone that far. So I got around to where they were when I first started trekking them, and there was this rock that the deer had gone around, and I'm talking a big rock, like a boulder. And so I went and stood on this big old boulder to have a look down this hill where the deer had potentially gone to, and that was my second big mistake because the deer were standing probably, I don't know, 20 metres, something like that. Like they were ridiculously close. Like the bird noise had not bothered them. They had just kept doing their thing, and me standing up on top of this boulder meant that I was just like this shining light, this beacon, just standing out for them to see. So that was the next big mistake that I made. So yeah, they ran off. Fair enough, safe to say. And then I'm just trying to think what actually happened from there. That morning, I'm pretty sure that was about the extent of it. I kind of had trekked around a bit. So this is Thursday morning. So I think I went home and just had breakfast and all this stuff. Like I trekked around for a few hours more trying to find them and just couldn't get a hold of them. Previous years I've been able to find where the wallow is and stuff like that, but they were really spread out this year compared to what they have been in other years. So in other years they've literally just stuck to this one whole ridge line, and there's like, or mountain I should say, and there's like all these different break-offs of ridges that come down from it. But this time they had spread all the way across the paddock, across this property that I've got access to. Like, it was ridiculous. I heard them in places I'd never even been before on the property. And my auntie and uncle were like, look, you need to go down to this back part of the property because we heard 2 roaring stags when we were down there the other day doing some work down the back paddocks. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I think that afternoon, that's what I went and did. I went down there, got to the back side of the property, and there actually wasn't much noise. There wasn't much about it all. I think this is a pretty eerie afternoon. I went out and it was kind of a bit dull. Like everything was just quiet, and I think that was when I went out. So I've gone out down this very back part, and I've kind of trekked around the back and the hills a little bit, waiting for some roars and stuff, and there just was nothing. So I started to follow what looked like recent deer trails down pretty much all the way back down to the front of the property, or down towards the front of the property. And as I got down closer to there, I started hearing some roars going on. So I was like, okay, great, I'm in the right place. So I got myself into a good position. The winds were going kind of front and back of me. So what would happen is they were swirling quite a lot because I was in a bit of a corner. So they'd go, kind of to the left of my face for a bit, and then they'd hit to the right of my face for a bit, and then it just kind of kept doing that for a while. So I set myself up because he was probably, as the crow flies, I hadn't seen him yet, but I reckon 200 metres, maybe 150, something like that. He was just standing up on top of the ridge down from where I was, and I was kind of in the corner of this creek setting, but on the mountainside that he was on. And I started doing some hind calls, and he started roaring back, and he started getting closer and closer. His roars were continuously on, it was just a full conversation happening. And while that was going on, I realized that I was probably on the wrong side of the fence. But I was like, you know what, I'm just going to see how this all plays out. So I kept calling him down, and he came in reasonably close. Like, there was a tree line right there, like bush line, tree line, that I couldn't see past, but it sounded like he was literally just on the other side of that. And that's when the winds changed. Blew against the back of my neck, and he went awfully quiet, and didn't hear from him, didn't see him again that night. So that was pretty much the end of my hunt. That was right on last lights anyway, pretty much. Friday morning, I believe this is when I went back up. I think this is when I went back up into the main area where they usually are. And I'm actually, this is funny, I'm losing what actually happened. I can't remember. You know what? I lie. One of these times I actually went around the back of the mountain again in the afternoon. So this must have been Friday afternoon maybe. I went back around the back of the mountain around the house to see what I could see. And unfortunately there was not much about. There was not much sign. I ended up bumping 2 pigs in the creek, and I was pretty devo. One of them was like a really decent boar, and I was just walking through the middle of the creek, and they're going through what they call a bit of a green drought at the moment, which is where everything looks green and lush. It looks beautiful, but their dams are really low on water still. The creek was not running. They're having quite a lot of issues with what to do moving forward, because once this green kind of gets chewed down, then they're kind of screwed if they don't get another good downfall of rain into their dams and stuff. But I went for a walk around the back there, and I was walking through the creek on the sandy creek beds, and I was literally probably, I reckon it would have been no more than 3 meters away from this decent boar. And I saw him because he opened his eyes, and I was like, oh, fuck, that's a pig right there. And I had my arrow knocked already. And so I clipped on, and literally just as I clipped on, I think the winds were, like, I was close enough for him to be able to smell me, and just, up, and he just did the whole pig sniffing thing that they do, the loud, or whatever it is that they do. And he was running in through, like, long grass by then. He hit himself in the long stuff and kind of bailed out, so... Yeah, that was about the extent of that hunt. I really can't remember what happened Friday morning, but there was a few more circumstances. So I got into the place. So this is actually very similar back to where this, I believe, was yesterday morning, Saturday morning. I got back to where old mate was in the one that I called down the corner of the creek, and he gave me he smelt me and ran away. So I got back to there in the morning. He was roaring again Saturday morning. So I went over and I'd set up, and I was at the bottom of this hill. He was at the top of the hill. This is probably no earlier than 6:30 or thereabouts. I think this whole event was over by 6:52. I remember looking at my clock. And so I was standing at the bottom of the mountain. He was standing at the top of the mountain. He's roaring his head off. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to try and call him in. So I went for it. I set myself into a really good position. The winds were blowing over to my, blowing over to my right, essentially. So blowing from the left over to the right. And he was up in front of me. But as I was walking through to position myself, I actually saw some deer just kind of duck under the fence and move off to the side. Like, they'd obviously seen me and started to move their way away from me. And from what I could see, I thought that was the boundary fence line. So I was kind of like, I don't have much space to move here. What I would have liked to have done was move around a little bit more and try and get into a slightly different position. But I was like, you know what, this is a pretty good opening. I'm in a good space. I'm going to give him a yell on in. So he literally came in within minutes, like not even a minute, I don't think. I think I've got footage of this, and I turned my camera on after my third hind call or something, and he was literally coming in on a string. So he ran down this hill, and he's coming straight for me, and at about probably 60 metres, 80 metres, something along the... Probably wouldn't be close, probably 60 or 50 metres. He literally just stopped. It's like he hit a brick wall, and he's just nose up in the air, sniffing. What the fuck's that? Like, he could obviously tell that I was there. And although the winds were blowing... I actually lied. The winds were blowing in my face, and that's why I thought I could get away with this. Although the winds were blowing in my face, I thought it would be fine, but what I didn't take into account, the thermals. Like, thermals obviously are a thing that we need to pay attention to, but I thought with the wind blowing directly in my face that it might be something I can get away without having to worry about. However, that was incorrect. Within that 50 metres or whatever it was from me, he literally hit that wall and stopped, and gave me a little honk, and then he roared again, and then he kind of came around, so I gave him another little hind call. But instead of coming in closer, he did like a big loop, and he just wanted to get my wind then. So he tucked himself down to this little creek bed, crossed the creek, and then ran around until he got my wind, and then he just moseyed up into this hill. And so that was the end of that guy, unfortunately. What a nightmare. Just even reliving this hurts. Jesus. It's all still a bit fresh. So I know I'm missing a story from one, and I don't know where or what happened in that time, but that's all right. So yesterday afternoon, I was like, it was coming to a clash. I was like, it's all got to come together. Like, I've got pretty much two last chances to try and get onto these guys. Yesterday afternoon and this morning, and although I had been bashed around a bit by these reds, although nature was winning, I was still determined. I was like, you know what, I haven't come all this way for nothing. And so what I had done in the morning was go up this hill, and when I was at the top of the hill, I had a little sit down, and I filled up my wind checker, and I had some food, and then I drove back home afterwards because I was just waiting to see if there was much noise about it or anything. There wasn't. And so this is like 9 o'clock when I was doing all this, and just wondering if there'd be any other movement or not. And it was heating up proper by 9 o'clock. Like, the last red calls I heard all from Wednesday through to Sunday would be probably 7:15 at latest. Earliest I kind of heard was around the
5:15 mark, thereabouts. Like, obviously I wasn't out there for much longer than from that because the sun just not being up and not really knowing where to go because I wanted to go where the boys were. So yeah, plan was to go out, wait for the calls and then go to them. But yeah, getting out there at 5 o'clock most days, not hearing calls till about 5:15 and then kind of chasing them down from there. But yeah, so I left my wind checker up on top of this hill. So I was like, okay, I need to go back up there. And this is the hillside where all the deer always are. They're always hanging out there from my previous experiences. So I went and got my wind checker and the winds were just back and forth and back and forth. And the thing to know with this is the lay of the land. This is up on a hill and then there's just dips and valleys that go all off of the side, ridges that come all down from it, and it's just, depending on where you are, and it will just swirl because of that. And so I was just kind of, there's this one ridge where I shot that deer, where the big boy was, where they tend to hang out quite a lot. So my plan was to walk around the top of this ridge, go down the bottom, and then come back along the face of it because the winds were just horrible. And that was the way that was going to work out. So I did that, and the winds were, like I said, horrible. They were just constantly blowing me down along this ridge. But I was keen to stick to my plan because I could hear some stuff going on this face. So I was like, you know what, get all the way around, come back to it, and I'm sure you'll run into something or hear something along the way. So I did that, and as I cut down, I probably cut down like a little inlet too soon. Oh, talk about deers make me tired. Cut down this little ridge like a little bit soon, and so as I was walking down the hill, of course, I hear some running, some hooves running, like trampling down this hill. And I look across, and there is a hind and a little fawn. And then soon after them is a little forky chasing them. I was like, oh, fuck, here we go. And then within probably a minute of that, there was another 2 hinds that run down this hill. And so essentially they were going to where my starting point was going to be. And so they ran down and ran off over this hill. So I got down to the bottom, wind still blowing horribly, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to check. So it's like down one ridge and over another little ridge, and there's a dam in there that can occasionally hold deer. So I kind of made my way up into that hill to see if I could see some deer or anything down in there. And then I started to mosey my way up to where those deer had actually just run off to. So I was like, you know what, I don't know where anything else is. I'm just going to make my way over to these deer. And it just becomes really thick eventually. And so I'm pretty sure they just ran straight to the thick stuff and they were done. So I made my way back to my starting point. So the starting point that I was going to use. And then I started walking along the bottom of this ridge. And all while the winds were just frustrating the hell out of me. I remember walking through and just being frustrated is the best way to put it. And so I got to this point, and I got back to pretty much the start where I'd almost left my wind checker there. I walked up to the top of this ridge, and I was just sitting on the ridge, and I was like, just wanting some signs. Like I was just a bit lost. Like I couldn't hear any deer. I'd scared the deer that I'd seen, I'd scared the only deer that I had seen for that afternoon. And so I just sat on this log for a bit, and I remember just hopping up, being like, there was cows. Like the cows had moved quite a lot, so they were in this paddock with me. They hadn't seen me at all, but they had moved from one part of the paddock to the other. And it seemed like what happened is when they moved from this part A to part B, essentially that they had bumped this red stag off of what he was doing. So there was some cows going about their thing and mooing and whatever. And then I hear like little grunts and stuff coming as if it was from a red. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and I stood up and started to move a little bit. And then he let off some roars. I'm like, oh no, that's definitely a red. So I started pacing down. I was after that morning and having blown that stalk because of the thermals, I'm like, I'm getting underneath this sucker and I'm going to call him in, and Bob's going to be my uncle. Like, things are going to be done. And so I started to make my way down, and literally 10 steps from where I was like, that is a deer, I'm going, he walked over the hill straight at me. I definitely had my arrow knocked. I didn't have my release hooked in at all, but he's walking straight at me. And so in hindsight, I should have hooked in and just drawn back straight away. But he was looking at me and just swaying his head side to side. I knelt down as soon as I saw his antlers and head come over. So I knelt down, and he just kept walking straight towards me, and he's just swaying his head side to side. He just looked like he was panting hard. And he's just, started making his way straight up towards me. He's probably come within 10 meters of me as he's walked straight past me. And then as soon as he's gotten past me, that's when I've drawn back. But he was just on a steady mosey. He just kept going. So I gave him a hind call. He didn't stop. I gave him another hind call. He stopped and he looked around for a little bit. He would be probably 50 meters at this point. And then he kind of ducked off into this next ridge. So I was like, fuck. So I quickly started to make my way across. And as I got close to the top of the ridge, as you do when you panic, I stood on a big old stick, big old crack, and I stood over the edge and he was gone. So I don't know. He did also walk up towards where my winds were going. So I thought he was in my winds, and I was surprised he hadn't run off yet. But then he started to make his way over into that ridge, and I think he must have copped a whiff of it. Or something along those lines. I'm not sure, but yeah, he was not there. So that one probably hurt the most. I don't know about that. They all hurt a lot. But that one hurt a lot because he was right there. It was literally handed to me, and I didn't take that opportunity. It's like I had... Essentially, I was getting up myself for being not patient enough with that young guy from the morning, the stag from the morning that hit the thermals, because I kind of thought about thermals. And I was like, no, I'd be fine. So I was beating myself up about that. I'm like, you just weren't patient enough. You should have got up on top with him, hung out with him for a bit, and then gone for it. And then with this guy, I was like, you were too patient. You were waiting for a better opportunity, but there's no opportunity 10 meter away deer. Oh my God. Just shit to relive. And it's funny because I talked to a few people last night, and they were like, you should have drawn back. Even if they were walking to you, when they're that kind of dazed, they will look at you for a bit, or they'll run 10 meters and then look at you for a bit. They won't do much at all. Yeah. Hindsight, hey? Old hindsight. And then this morning, it was my last opportunity, so I hopped up, got out there nice and early. It's funny, every morning when I went to when I went to go park up, because it's a separate property, essentially it's like a split block from where I sleep versus... apparently I didn't sleep enough. From where I sleep versus where the deer hang out. And so I've driven to this space, and with me, I sat down, just kind of didn't sit down, just hanging out in my car for a bit, just waiting for some roars, waiting to hear some sign. And over to the left is where the deer always hang out, and over to the right was all the new space, essentially, where I've been hearing the deer hang out for the first time for this weekend. In the rut, so I was like, you know what? I'll go whichever way I want. Actually, what I was going to say is every morning on my way there was this hare on the road. He was always just there. And so this morning I was like, I'm going to take a shot at him. So when I pulled up, when I came around the corner, around the bend, sure enough, he's just sitting there, he's hanging out. So I started to slow down, got up to him nice and close, had my high beams on. He was just kind of bouncing away slowly. But he bounced straight off the side of the road. So I quickly just tried to pull my car over to the left a little bit so I could see him. And he ducked off enough into the bushes. So I reversed up and had a decent look for a while. And unfortunately, I just didn't get another look at him. Didn't get another view of him, unfortunately. So Couldn't even hunt a hare this weekend. So I made my way down, sitting in the car and just waiting, and then I heard the boys going over to the right, so I was like, you know what, it's going to happen. Today is the day. So I got up on top of the ridge, the one that I'd heard tried to call him down from previously, thinking that they'd be up there, and it turns out that they were not there. They were over in the valleys over to the right, which at this time I thought was the neighbour's block. I'm like, you know what, that's on the neighbour's block. The only thing I can possibly do here is try to hind call him over. So I was hind calling, and he was responding. He started coming. He was coming closer and closer. You could hear him making his way through. Just having a quick drink. He was on his way. And I was up on top of this hill. He was essentially down in like what seemed to be, I guess you'd call a little bit of a gully that goes into a creek. And that creek joins on eventually to the block that I was on. And so I was just kind of up on top for a bit, just calling. So I started to make my way over to the side that he was on a bit more. And as I was making my way over, there was a heap of cattle just standing there. And I obviously just spooked the absolute hell out of them. Like, they hopped and they ran. They sprinted straight over to where the deer was, which made him just go completely quiet. So I was looking at the lay of the land. I was like, you know what, from where he got to, I can probably make a move and get in close enough on my block and try calling him across the fence line if I need to. And so I made my way down, started to get over into that space. And as I was over there, I actually realised that the fence line for my block was much further than what I thought it actually was. Like, he was in the block I was on the whole time. So I could have gone down and done this method, essentially. The winds weren't great for it, but I could have gone down there much earlier and continued that conversation with him. But unfortunately, he just went quiet from there. So I made my way around and had a whole look at this big space that was there. And it was like a little hidden wonderland. Like, it was really quite good to see, to be honest. Wasn't a whole heap of sign of deer, but it was like a little hideout space somewhere where you would probably expect to see deer. And I'm not surprised that I was hearing the boys over there a bit more. It's not like big open spaces, but more like valleys between mountains sort of thing. Like, it was just a bit more confined in space, and so I don't know whether they actually like that or not. It seemed like it would be just like a cool little hangout spot, but whether that means that it's a dangerous spot for them or not, I'm not sure. But it seemed like a place that if I was a deer, I would hang out. But yeah, so it was kind of at that moment I started realizing that my rut was probably over, and so I held on to a lot of hope and held on to that hope until I hopped in the car. But yeah, drove back and started talking to my auntie and uncle, and they're like, oh, were you in the scrub paddock, which is the paddock that the deer usually are in? And I said, no, I went over to the other one, and I was up on this hill. And they're like, oh, because we drove past and there was a stag right by your car in the scrub paddock. I was like, of course there was. So I think there was a lot of things I learnt this weekend, that's for sure. A lot of things were learnt this weekend. But I guess a few of the biggest takeaways, they're not always going to make noise. There was a little post I saw from Cal Sned on the weekend. It was like, go where the boys are, not where you think they are. And I think this is that morning that is kind of lost on me. I spent that morning just looking where I thought, or where the deer usually hang out, and I didn't really see much of them at all. And so from then on, I was chasing the noise. I was chasing where the boys were, where the rutting boys were, where they were roaring from, because in my head that was going to be the best ones to work with. But within saying that, I think even the guys that aren't making much noise, hence that spiker at the start of the story, they'll still come in if there's a hind calling. I think with such a vast amount of country, like I think they've got 3,000 acres or thereabouts. I think I was playing on about 2,500 of it, maybe not quite, maybe 2,000 of it even, out on those back paddocks. With that much space, like it is going to be hard always. It's always going to be hard to actually find where the deer are. So listening out for it, but I think I was always very quick to go straight to the very first roar that I heard, whereas potentially maybe what I should have done is sat around for a bit longer based on what I found out this morning, that the deer were hanging around my car. Like I'm talking 100 metres as the crow flies maybe to my car. Actually not even, like 50 metres maybe, is where they saw him. So the other thing is that although I had spooked that deer, the big boy, the big boy of the whole mountain that I talked about to start with, I never actually saw him again, but I did see that other guy that walked straight up and past me. So even though I had been on that mountain a fair bit over the last 4 days, it still, still didn't really seem to bother them that much. So I think making assumptions when hunting is always the worst thing to do, and I learned that lesson again this weekend when I thought that the birds had given me up on that stalk. Paying attention to nature, making sure that you respect things like thermals is another huge one, and obviously this is stuff that I know and I've been taught before, but I just kind of thought with the winds in my face that it would be all good to go, but it was not the case. The shooting a deer that is aware that you're there, it's an interesting one, because most people would say, hey, you should have just shot lower, but in the heat of the moment, I just wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking about shot placement being where I would usually want it to be. So when I looked at him, the line of the shot was perfect. It's just it was too high. So yes, obviously if the critter is aware of you, you probably do need to allow for that whole movement side of things. Or you should definitely allow for that. Is another takeaway that I need to learn from. I think really, I went into this weekend very confident. My last 4 hunts have been solid. Like, they've worked out really well. Last 3 hunts. This was the 4th one. And I had a lot of fun. Like, I had an awesome experience on the weekend. I got to see lots of deer. I got to be in amongst it. I got to witness the roar, which is just absolutely incredible. But yeah, it was incredibly frustrating as well at times. I forget. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, by no means am I upset with the roar. I am a little disappointed that I didn't walk away with a deer at all. But at the same time, it just makes me hungrier than ever to get on out again. It's just unfortunate that I don't have time to go back out for April at all. It would be, it's just not going to happen. So really, until next year, I will not hear those reds going again, unfortunately. But yeah, what was awesome was to see the amount of people that have had awesome rutting and roaring experiences this year. The amount of people who reached out to me and said, dude, just keep going, like, you're doing so well, just keep it up. The amount of like bits of tips and pieces that I got given was awesome from everyone, so thank you for that if you were involved in that. I think what I was going to say, you know when you drive past a bird on the road, it's dead, and it just has awesome feathers? I just always want to stop, but I've got cars coming both ways, and it just would not look good, me running out and grabbing all these feathers from this bird. But yeah, I've actually heard of people taking like whole wings and stuff. Off topic, and I've literally just lost my damn train of thought again as to what I was going to say. it will come to me probably once I when I stop recording. But yeah, it was an awesome experience. Definitely something that I wish would happen more often. The old Red Roar would be incredible if it could happen twice a year. I'm excited. To be honest, I've always liked hunting the guys in the bachelor mobs. So I'm always excited for winter, like a June hunt. Hopefully I can get back out and amongst the boys then, because then you get to see what sort of potential, I guess, your block holds. Although apparently they venture off. So yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying. What reds are available on the block at that point. But I am intrigued to kind of see what happens moving forward based on the fact that they were not really hanging out where they usually hang out. I don't know if that was just because of this rut. It seemed like there was plenty of boys around, but unfortunately it just couldn't make it happen. I thought like I actually came into the weekend probably a bit too cocky, to be honest. Like I knew that I'd hind called them in to me before, and so I kind of thought it would happen that way again. Unfortunately, it just didn't piece together, even though my sexy hind voice did work very well, and I did call the guys in multiple times and had those conversations with them. But anywho, that is something for later. It just wasn't meant to be this year. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun. And I hope you guys had a lot of fun and got out as well. Yeah. Happy hunting. Happy rut. Enjoy your day. Thanks for listening, team.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bowhunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you are enjoying the show or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast, and on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team, fling some arrows, get that practice in, and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.